The fluorescent strip above Bay 4 had been flickering for 6 days. Maintenance had a ticket. Nobody had come. Elle Mercer pushed her mop bucket past the nurse's station at 11:40 p.m. and did not look up when she heard Whitlock's voice carrying down the corridor. "And the thing about this floor," he was saying, "is that everyone on it performs a vital function." She kept moving. The bucket wheels squeaked against linoleum damp from her last pass. "The surgeons operate, the nurses monitor, the residents learn." A pause, timed for effect. "And the cleaning staff ensure that when we save someone's life, we do it in a room that smells like lemons." Laughter. 3 residents, maybe 4. She could hear Pip Sethi's laugh, higher than the others, half a beat late, the laugh of someone checking whether they were supposed to. Ella squeezed the mop head against the wringer. The water that came out was gray. "Genuinely," Whitlock continued, "I mean that. Someone has to clean up after real work." More laughter. Someone, a male resident, young, said, "What would we do without them?" Not a question. "Exactly," Whitlock said. "The whole enterprise runs on it." "Like a pit crew," the same resident said. "Better than a pit crew." Whitlock's voice warmed with the pleasure of a good line landing. "A pit crew gets thanked." The laughter this time was fuller. Elle moved the bucket forward 8 inches and began on the next tile. Whitlock stepped around the wet floor without breaking stride, without looking at her, and kept walking toward Bay 6 with his residents trailing behind him like a clean white wake. The fluorescent strip flickered once, then held. Thomas Reyes was sitting on a hallway chair outside radiology, waiting for someone to tell him he could go home. He had a paper cup of ginger ale in both hands, and he was watching the floor when Elle passed him. "You know where the waiting room is?" he asked. "My wife's been down there since 8. 2 floors, Elle said. "Elevators at the end." "They keep saying one more test." He turned the cup. "I told her to go home. She won't go home." Elle nodded and pushed the bucket forward. She was 10 feet past him when she heard him say something else, not to her, to nobody. And then the sound of the cup hitting the floor and the chair scraping and the heavy, specific thud of a person who has stopped being able to hold themselves up. She turned. Whitlock was already there. He moved fast. She would give him that. Sir, can you hear me?" He had 2 fingers on the carotid. "Pip, crash cart now. Someone call a code." Pip ran. An alarm went up at the nurse's station. "Sinus rhythm's gone," Whitlock said, more to himself than anyone. He was reading Thomas's face, his color. Classic presentation, diaphoretic, chest pain. Reads MI. "Let's move him." He looked up at the nearest resident. "What do we give him?" "Aspirin, nitro, aspirin, anticoagulation. Get me a 12 lead. Whitlock was already loosening Thomas's collar. "Someone tell his family." Pip came back at a run with the crash cart. "BP's 80/50. Expected. He's in cardiogenic shock." Whitlock pulled on a glove. Elle stood at the edge of the corridor. Her mop handle was in her right hand. She had not moved. She did not move. Her eyes tracked to Thomas Reyes's neck. The 12 lead printed. Pip held it up, turning it toward the light. Whitlock read it standing, not touching it, the way he read everything, from a slight remove, as though the information came to him rather than the other way around. "ST elevation, leads 2, 3, and AVF, he said. "Inferior MI. Let's get him to cath." A nurse in scrubs came out of the nurse's station pulling on a glove. "Cath team's on call. You want me to activate?" "Please. Consent?" "He's unresponsive. We move." She was already on the phone. Ella had set the mop against the wall. Her eyes fixed on the monitor strip Pip had not put down. "His trachea is deviated," Ella said. The corridor went quiet in the specific way corridors go quiet when something has been said that doesn't fit the room. Whitlock turned. He looked at her the way a person looks at a door that has spoken. "Excuse me?" "Left side." Ella's voice was the same volume it had been. "His trachea is deviated to the left. His breath sounds on the right are absent." Whitlock's expression moved through several things very quickly and landed on something between bafflement and mild irritation. "He's in an inferior MI. His neck veins are distended. That's from... Whitlock stopped. He looked at Pip. Where's the 12 lead showing... It's showing inferior elevation, Pip said. Her voice was careful. But... She stopped. But what? Pip did not finish the sentence. The charge nurse lowered the phone from her ear. She did not put it down. She glanced at Elle, then at the monitor. What's his O2 sat? Not to Whitlock. To the room. 81, someone said. On 15 liters. Silence. Whitlock turned back to Elle. His voice was not unkind. It was the voice of a man explaining something to someone who has wandered into a room they don't belong in. I understand you're trying to help, but we have a clear 12 lead and a classic presentation. I need you to step back. She held his gaze for 1 second. Then her eyes dropped to her hands. She stepped back. The charge nurse activated the cath team. The supply alcove was off the corridor, between the linen shelves and the sharps disposal unit. The charge nurse found Elle there 4 minutes later. How long have you worked this floor? Her hands went to the shelf. She was straightening towels that didn't need straightening. 8 months. Before that? 3 south. Before the hospital. Ella said nothing. Tracheal deviation. She pulled a folded sheet flat. Absent breath sounds. Distended neck veins. That's a Beck's triad. You know what Beck's triad is? I've heard the term. From where? I read. The charge nurse looked at her. What's the normal central venous pressure? Ella was quiet for a moment. 8 to 12 centimeters of water. The linen cart squeaked past the doorway. Neither of them looked at it. His sat is 73 now. Ella said nothing. If you're right, the charge nurse said, he needs a needle, not a cath lab. I know. Then why are you standing in here? Elle's gaze settled on the wall behind her shoulder. Because Dr. Whitlock told me to step back. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have tonight. The charge nurse studied her for a long moment. She pushed off the shelf. Then, at the doorway, she stopped. You know what the worst part is? She said, not turning around. He's going to document this as a straightforward MI, and nobody in that corridor is going to write down what you said. She walked back toward the corridor without waiting for a response. The stairwell door at the end of Ward 3 was propped open with a rubber wedge. Cold air moved through it, carrying the smell of floor wax and something metallic from the parking structure below. Marcus Boone was doing his rounds, clipboard in hand, checking the door log. He looked up when Elle came through. You done on 3? He asked. Yes. Heard there was an incident. A patient went down. You involved? No. Marcus wrote something on his clipboard. Not about her. Whitlock's team handle it? Yes. Good. He flipped a page. Then he looked up again. Someone said a cleaner spoke up. Elle said nothing. Said she knew the terminology? He watched her. That unusual? I wouldn't know. He nodded slowly. He was about to move on when he glanced at her hands, both of them wrapped around the mop handle, knuckles visible, completely still. Your hands are steady, he said. The way he said it, it wasn't a compliment or a question. It was an observation, the kind a person makes when they've seen enough hands to know what steady means. She held them there. Get some sleep, Boone said. He walked back through the stairwell door. It swung slowly behind him, the rubber wedge catching it, before it closed all the way. Ella stood in the gap between the corridor and the cold air. The fluorescent strip above Bay 4 was flickering again at the far end of the hall. Through the ward's glass panel she could make out the crash cart outside Bay 6, and the charge nurse's back, and the shape of Thomas Reyes on the gurney with a mask over his face, and a sat monitor reading numbers that were going the wrong direction. She did not move. The code team was still in the corridor when Whitlock turned to Ella. You need to leave this floor. He said it the way he'd say clear the field, not angry, just final. 2 residents stood behind him, watching. Ella didn't move immediately. The gurney carrying Thomas Reyes was 20 feet away, an oxygen mask fogging and clearing with each shallow breath, the sat monitor reading 71 now. I said leave. His neck veins are consistent with the volume state of an inferior MI patient in cardiogenic compromise. Whitlock's voice stayed level. Which is what he has. Which I have managed before you were mopping this floor. He glanced at the residents. A small performance. Someone call security. Pip reached for her pager. Stopped. Dr. Whitlock, the strip did show Dr. Sethi. Just her name. That was enough. Pip's hand dropped. Right, sorry. The left side isn't moving, Ella said. She hadn't meant to say it. The words came out flat, clinical, the way they used to come out in a different room, in a different life. Watch his chest wall. Left side isn't tracking with the right. Whitlock turned back to her fully. The residents went still. I'm going to ask you one more time. I heard you. Then you understand that the next person who speaks to you in this corridor will be wearing a uniform that isn't yours. Ella looked at Tomas's chest, the asymmetry she'd clocked, left side not moving the way the right was. She looked at the monitor. Then she picked up her mop handle from the wall where she'd left it and walked toward the stairwell. Rosa was at the nurse's station writing her shift note when Boone came through the fire door. He had his radio clipped to his shoulder, and the expression of a man who had been given an order he did not enjoy. They want me to walk her out, he said. Rosa didn't look up. She's already gone. I know, I need to find her. He set both hands on the counter. Rosa, what actually happened out there? Write it down first. What did Whitlock tell you? Unlicensed individual intervened in an active clinical emergency. Rosa set her pen down. She said one sentence. She didn't touch the patient. That's not what the report's going to say. Then the report's going to be wrong. She picked the pen back up. I've been writing these notes for 30 years, Marcus. I know what I put in them. What are you putting in yours? She was quiet for a moment. The monitor at the far end of the station beeped twice, then steadied. I'm putting what I observed. Patient presented with O2, sat 73% on 15L. Environmental Services staff made one verbal observation regarding clinical signs. Attending physician maintained original diagnosis and directed staff to leave the floor. She looked at him then. That's what happened. That's not going to match his. No, Rosa said. It's not. Boone straightened. He looked at the whiteboard behind her. Patient names, room numbers, the small bureaucratic geography of the night shift. You know what happens if your note contradicts his and they pull both. I know what happens. Rosa. I said I know. She turned back to her page. Her handwriting was small and even, the same as it had been for 3 decades. She was right about the SAT. She was right about the neck veins. I don't know what else she was right about, but I'm not writing down something I didn't see. Boone was quiet for a moment. She in the stairwell? Probably. Ella was sitting on the second step of the stairwell, with her back against the cinder block wall, when the door opened. Boone let it close behind him. He didn't rush her. You know why I'm here, he said. Yes. I've got to walk you out. Badge suspension. Pending review. He held up a hand before she could speak. Not my call. I know. He came down one step and stood beside her, not above her. You want to tell me where you learned to read a neck vein like that? Ella said nothing. I was a medic, 14 years. He let that sit. I know what steady hands look like under pressure. I know what guessing looks like. Those weren't the same thing tonight. She stood up, picked up the mop bucket handle. Are we going? Yeah. He held the door. We're going. They walked the length of the supply corridor in silence, past the linen carts and the cleaning chemical shelves and the sharp smell of chlorhexidine that clung to everything on this floor. At the freight elevator, Boone pressed the button, and they waited. Is there someone I should call? He asked. No. Family? Anyone who'd want to know your... No. He nodded. Didn't push it. The elevator light above the door counted down from 4. For what it's worth, he said, I don't think you did anything wrong. Ella looked at the elevator door. It won't be worth much by morning. Probably not. The doors opened. He gestured for her to go first. Doesn't make it less true. They wrote it down without speaking. The charge room was small and smelled of cold coffee. Whitlock stood at the dictation terminal, jacket still on, unhurried. Pip stood near the door with the resident log open in her hands. Corridor event, 2:47 a.m., Whitlock said into the recorder. Environmental Services staff present during patient deterioration, made verbal statements representing clinical competence she does not hold. Staff was directed to leave the clinical area. Security notified per protocol. He paused. Patient transferred to cath lab under my direct supervision. Diagnosis: inferior MI with cardiogenic compromise. Management: standard. He clicked the recorder off. Signed the log at 2:48. Pip wrote the time. Her other hand was in her coat pocket, where the monitor strip printout had been since the code team dispersed. Folded once, the thermal paper slightly warm from her body heat. The SAT was 71, she said. Whitlock turned, not sharply, just turned. Yes. On 15 liters. Pip. He said her name the same way he'd said it in the corridor. Patient. Certain. What is your differential for an inferior MI with RV involvement and volume-dependent hypotension? She knew the answer. She gave it. He nodded through each item as she listed them. And does any item on that list require a needle in the chest? No. Good. He took the log from her and countersigned it. Go get some sleep. You did well tonight. She didn't move immediately. She mentioned tracheal deviation. I wasn't sure if I saw it or not. Whitlock set the log on the desk. He looked at her the way he looked at a chart that had been filed incorrectly. Not angry, just correcting. Tracheal deviation in a spontaneously breathing patient with a SAT of 71 would present with significantly more respiratory distress than Mr. Reyes demonstrated. What you saw was a patient in cardiogenic compromise. What she said was a cleaning staff member repeating terminology she'd encountered somewhere. Those are not the same event. Pip said nothing. Are we clear? Yes. Good. He picked up the log again. Go. She walked out. In the elevator, she took the printout from her pocket and unfolded it. The numbers were still there. She folded it again and put it back. Dawn came gray through the hospital's glass entrance, the kind of light that made the lobby floor look like standing water. Ella stood at the security desk, while the overnight guard processed her temporary badge return, not speaking, just waiting, her cleaning cart already handed off to the day shift supervisor, who had not asked any questions. The entrance doors slid open. A man in a dark coat came through carrying a leather satchel, moving like someone who had been awake for hours and was accustomed to it. He glanced at Elle. At the lanyard she was holding, the cart gone, the particular stillness of a person waiting to be released. And stopped. You're the environmental services staff, he said. Not a question. Yes. Adrian Vance, hospital counsel. He didn't extend his hand. Don't go far. He walked past her toward the elevator. The doors closed. Elle stood at the entrance. Her phone buzzed once. She read the text from the badge management system. Access credential ENV4447 has been deactivated pending administrative review. Contact Human Resources to schedule a compliance interview. She put the phone in her pocket. Outside, the parking lot held maybe 6 cars, and somewhere behind the building, a truck was reversing, its warning beep steady and indifferent. She pushed through the glass doors into the cold. Upstairs, in the office Vance had already reached, a laptop opened. His fingers moved across the keyboard for 40 seconds. He hit send. The email's subject line read, Corridor Incident. ENV447, Unlicensed Clinical Representation. Urgent. The locker room smelled of old rubber and someone's microwaved soup, still warm from the night shift. Rosa pushed through the door without knocking. Ella had her uniform half unbuttoned. She did not turn around. They called a code at 4:47, Rosa said. I was at the med cart. I heard the whole thing. Elle pulled her street shirt from the hook. He didn't make it. Rosa stepped closer. Thomas Reyes, 42 minutes in the cath lab, and his heart gave out on the table. Ella put the shirt on, smoothed the collar. Her hands were steady. You're not going to ask me anything, Rosa said. It wasn't a question. No. Because you already know. Rosa watched her. You knew in that corridor. Elle picked up her bag. Did you say anything else to the team after they took him? Rosa asked. After Whitlock dismissed you. I went back to work. That's not what I asked. Elle zipped the bag. I know what you asked. Rosa moved to block the door. Not aggressive, just present, solid, 30 years of night shifts behind her feet. There's paperwork at the charge desk with your name on it. Already. Someone filed before the code was even called off. Ella's grip tightened on the bag strap. One small adjustment. It says you made a clinical assessment without credentials, Rosa said. Uses the word interference. That's not a policy write-up, Elle. That's a legal category. I heard you. I don't think you did. Rosa stepped aside. But you will. The corridor outside had already forgotten. A dietary aide pushed a cart toward the service elevator, wheels squeaking on the damp floor. The overhead fluorescents hummed at their usual pitch. Two nurses at the far end talked about parking validation. Pip was waiting outside the charge desk, still in scrubs, her lanyard twisted around one finger. She straightened when she saw Rosa. I need to talk to you, Pip said. Rosa kept walking. Walk with me then. The monitor strip. Pip's voice dropped. From the corridor, before they moved him. Rosa stopped. What about it? The rhythm Whitlock dictated for the report. Pip glanced toward the charge desk window. It doesn't match what was on the screen, at the time, before the transfer. How different? The axis deviation he described. Pip exhaled. It wasn't there yet. It developed later, in the cath lab. Rosa looked at her. Are you telling me the timeline in that report is wrong? I'm telling you what I saw on the strip. And what are you going to do with that? Pip's fingers stopped twisting the lanyard. She said nothing. Pip, I don't know. She said it quietly, like she was confessing to a parking ticket. I don't know yet. Rosa did not push. She filed it, the way she filed everything, behind her eyes, in the place where 30 years of things she'd seen and not reported lived in careful rows. Go home, she said. Sleep. Pip left without looking back. Rosa walked to the charge desk and picked up the incident report. She read it once, standing. Elle sat in the last pew of the hospital chapel because it was the only room on the lower level with chairs that weren't plastic. The lights were dimmed to something approaching amber. The floor wax out in the corridor smelled of pine and something chemical underneath, and the coffee from the vending machine 2 hallways over had gone cold in her hand before she'd drunk half of it. She heard the chaplain's voice first, low and practiced, and then footsteps. She didn't look up. Take as long as you need, Mrs. Reyes. The footsteps stopped. Ella raised her eyes. A woman in her 50s, coat still on, a paper bag from the gift shop dangling from one hand, like she'd bought it for someone who no longer needed it. She was looking directly at Ella. You were there, Renata Reyes said. In the hallway, I saw you. Yes. Renata's jaw moved. The chaplain touched her elbow gently, but she didn't move. Did he? She stopped. Started again. Was he scared? Ella held her gaze. No. The chaplain steered Renata forward, murmuring something. Renata let herself be guided, but she looked back once before the side door closed. Rosa had the incident report face up on the desk blotter when Adrian Vance arrived at 7:15. He was younger than she'd expected. Dark suit, no tie, a tablet under his arm. He smiled the way people smile when they are being careful. Rosa Delgado? Adrian Vance, Hospital Counsel. Thanks for staying. I didn't have anywhere to be. He sat across from her and set the tablet down. I wanted to walk you through the incident documentation before it goes to administration. Routine for something like this. What is something like this? An unauthorized clinical statement made by a non-credentialed staff member during an active emergency. He said it pleasantly. The report names Elle Mercer, Environmental Services. Your shift. I know whose shift it was. Of course. He turned the tablet toward her. The timeline here places Ms. Mercer's statement at 4:22. The patient was transferred to the cath lab at 4:29. Is that consistent with your recollection? Rosa looked at the numbers. 4:22. She thought about the dietary cart she'd heard, the sound of the wheels, the overhead page that had come at 4:19. Close enough, she said. Vance's answer had not matched. She did not say so. We'd like you to countersign as shift supervisor, he said. Confirms the documentation was reviewed by the senior floor staff. I'd like 24 hours to review it properly. A pause. Brief, professional. That's reasonable. I'll need it back by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Fine. He stood, tucked the tablet under his arm, and smiled again. We appreciate your cooperation. This is a difficult situation for everyone." Rosa watched him go. Vance's footsteps receded down the corridor and disappeared into the elevator. Rosa read the signature line a second time, then set the report face down and picked up her coat. The parking structure stairwell was cold, concrete, and smelled of exhaust and rain-damp cement. Ella was on the second landing, bag over one shoulder, moving without hurrying. Rosa hit the door hard enough that it echoed. "I need 60 seconds, Rosa said. Ella stopped, did not turn around immediately. Then she did. "The timeline in that report is wrong," Rosa said. "I know it's wrong because I know what I heard and when I heard it. And I have until 9 tomorrow morning to put my name on it. Then don't sign it. It's not that simple, and you know it." Rosa climbed 2 steps, closing the gap. "If I refuse, they'll find someone who won't. And your name stays on a document that calls what you did a crime, and nobody contradicts it. That's the version that lives." Ella's jaw was set. "What do you want from me, Rosa?" "I want to know if you knew what you were looking at. In that corridor." Rosa kept her voice flat, factual. "Not how you knew. Not where you learned it. Just, did you know?" The stairwell held the silence for a long moment. Somewhere above them, a door opened and closed. "Yes," Elle said. "And what you said, that it wasn't presenting as an inferior MI. Was that right?" "Yes." Rosa exhaled through her nose. "Okay." She pressed her palm against the door behind her, the cold metal bar under her hand. "Okay, I'm not asking you for the rest of it tonight. But I need you to understand. If I sign that report, I'm saying the rest of it doesn't exist. And I'm not sure I can do that." Ella looked at her, not through her, not past her, at her. "I can't tell you what to do. I'm not asking you to." Rosa's hand stayed on the bar. "I'm telling you where I am." The door was neither open nor closed. Rosa's palm rested flat against the push bar, the weight of it held back by nothing more than her own arm. The care home smelled of warm toast and something underneath it that toast could not cover. Elle signed in at the front desk at 8:43 and waited while the receptionist found Deanne's extension. Scene 2. Diane Marsh ran Sycamore Lodge from an office the size of a large closet, and she had the particular efficiency of someone who delivered bad news, often enough that she no longer softened it. "Ms. Mercer," she gestured at the chair across from her. "I wanted to catch you before the month turned." Ella sat. "The invoice. The invoice." Diane opened a folder. "We've had to revise the residential rate, effective the 1st. The new figure is $2,200 a month. It was $1,850. I know what it was." Diane set the folder down. "Staffing costs. The night ratio went up. I'm not inventing this." "I understand." Ella did not move. "Is there a grace period on the new rate?" 30 days from notification, which is today." Diane looked at her steadily. "Your mother is doing well here, Ms. Mercer. I want that to continue. I'm not trying to make this difficult." "You're not." Elle picked up the revised schedule Diane slid across the desk. The number sat in the middle of the page in a plain font. "I'll sort the standing order." "Good." Diane closed the folder. "She's been asking for you. She had a reasonable night." Ella folded the paper once, cleanly, and put it in her jacket pocket. June's room was on the 2nd floor, south-facing, with a window that caught the morning light. She was sitting up in the chair by the bed when Elle came in, dressed, hair combed, a cup of tea going cold on the tray beside her. Scene 2. "There she is." June's face opened. "I was wondering when you'd come." "I'm here." Ella pulled the other chair close and sat. "How are you feeling?" "Tired. My hip." June waved a hand. "The young one, the nurse, the one with the braid. She's very gentle. I like her." She studied Ella's face. "You look thin." "I'm fine." "You always say that." June reached out and patted Ella's hand twice. "How is the hospital? Are they keeping you busy?" Ella's thumb pressed against the edge of the folded invoice in her pocket. "Busy enough." "You work too hard. You always did, even in training." June shook her head. "Your father used to say, he said that girl will be a surgeon before she's 30, and she'll have no idea what to do with herself after." She laughed, a small, dry sound. He was half right. Ella did not answer. Are they treating you well? The consultants? The senior ones? They treat me fine. Because you don't always say. June's hand tightened briefly on Ella's. You go quiet. You've always gone quiet when something's wrong. Nothing's wrong, Mum. June looked at her, unconvinced, then let it go the way she let most things go now, not resolved, just set aside. Will you stay for lunch? They do a decent soup on Thursdays. I can't. I've got things before my shift. Your shift? June nodded slowly. At the hospital. Yes. Good. She patted Ella's hand again. Good. That's where you belong, you know. Whatever they put you through in training, whatever. You belong there. She picked up her tea, found it cold, set it back down. You always knew what to do in a room, even as a girl. You'd walk in somewhere and just know. Ella stood, leaned down, pressed her lips to her mother's hair. June smelled of the same soap she had used for 30 years. I'll call on Sunday, Ella said. Bring biscuits, the chocolate ones. I will. The car park was half empty. Elle sat in the driver's seat with the engine off and her phone in her hand for a full minute before she dialed. Scene 3. Mercer, her solicitor, Paul Nkosi, picked up on the third ring. He had been her solicitor since the settlement, and he spoke to her in the clipped register of a man billing by the 6-minute unit. I got your message. What's happened? The hospital has generated an incident report. My name is on it. A pause. Describing what? Unlicensed clinical interference. Those are the words. Have you been asked to sign anything? Not yet. I have a meeting this afternoon. Don't sign. No hesitation. Don't sign anything that uses that language or any equivalent without sending it to me first. I know that. Elle looked at the care home entrance. A care assistant was wheeling someone out into the garden. I need to ask you something. The settlement bars me from discussing the original case, from making any claim or statement. But if I were called as a witness, subpoenaed, not volunteering, does the clause still bind me? The pause this time was longer. That's a more complicated question than you're making it sound. I know. Answer it. The clause was drafted to prevent you initiating disclosure. Whether it survives a compelled subpoena in a separate proceeding it's arguable. I wouldn't call it a clean exemption. Arguable which way? Arguable in your favor, potentially. But the other side would contest it, and that contest would cost money and time you may not have. He let that sit. Why are you asking this now? I'm trying to understand the shape of the room. The shape of the room, Nkosi repeated flatly. Ella, if there's something developing, you need to tell me before it develops further. I'll send you the incident report language this afternoon. Do that. He exhaled. And don't sign anything. She ended the call and sat with the phone in her lap. The care assistant had parked the wheelchair in a patch of sunlight. The resident in it lifted her face toward the warmth, eyes closed. Gwen Pauly's office was on the administrative corridor, between payroll and facilities management. She had a laminated sign on the door that read, Human Resources, Coordinator, and a desk covered in color-coded folders. Scene 4. Ms. Mercer. Gwen stood, offered her hand, sat back down. She was thorough and pleasant in the manner of someone who had been trained to be both. Thank you for coming in before your shift. I know it's not ideal timing. It's fine. So, Gwen opened a folder, pale blue, labeled with a reference number Elle could read upside down. You're aware there was an incident report filed following the event on Ward 3 Tuesday night. I'm aware. I need to walk you through the language, and then I'll ask you to sign an acknowledgement, not an admission, just a confirmation that you've received and read the document. She found the page. The report describes, quote, an unidentified individual who intervened without clinical authority during an acute patient event, potentially compromising the treating team's management of the situation. She looked up. That individual has been identified as you. The fluorescent light above Gwen's desk buzzed faintly, at a frequency Elle could feel in her back teeth. I'd like to read the full document before I sign anything, Ella said. Of course. Yes, that's entirely your right. Gwen slid the folder across. Ella read it. All 4 pages. Gwen waited, clicking her pen cap twice before stopping herself. The language was careful, consistent, and wrong in every specific that mattered. Potentially compromising, without clinical authority. Intervened unprompted. Each phrase technically defensible, each phrase doing quiet work. "Can I take this away?" Ella asked. "We'd normally process the acknowledgement today. I'd like to have someone look at the language first, before I sign." Gwen's expression did not change, but her pen went still. "I can give you 48 hours. After that, I'll need to escalate to the coordinator above me." "That's fine." Ella closed the folder and stood. "I'll be in touch." She carried the folder out under her arm. The corridor smelled of toner and old carpet. The stairwell between the locker room and Ward 3 was a dead zone, no cameras, no foot traffic, at the start of a night shift. Elle was 2 flights up when she heard the door below her open. Scene 5. Pip Seedy stopped on the landing below, one hand on the rail. She was in scrubs, her lanyard twisted. She looked up at Ella, and neither of them moved for a moment. "You're on tonight," Pip said. "Yes." Pip climbed the next 4 steps and stopped again, close enough now that Ella could see she hadn't slept. "I had to file a supplementary note," Pip said, "on the Reyes case, for the record." "All right." "They asked me to confirm Dr. Whitlock's account of the corridor sequence." Pip's hand tightened on the rail. "I confirmed it." Ella said nothing. I thought you should know. That's what the record says." Pip's eyes moved to the folder under Elle's arm, then away. "That's what I said." "I heard you." Pip opened her mouth, closed it. She looked for a moment like someone standing at the edge of something and measuring the drop. Then she straightened her lanyard and started up the stairs again. As she passed Ella, she said quietly, almost to herself, "I keep thinking about the monitor, the waveform." She did not stop walking. Ella did not ask her to. The stairwell door swung shut above. Ella stood on the landing, the folder pressed flat against her ribs, and listened to the sound of Pip's footsteps disappear into the ward. Rosa was already in the linen corridor when Elle arrived, a stack of folded gowns balanced against her hip, and a look on her face that meant she had been waiting. "It's filed," Rosa said. Elle reached past her for a fresh mop head. "Good morning to you, too." "Countersigned. Vance's office yesterday at 4. Rosa set the gowns down on the cart. "You know what countersigned means. It means it's official. It means it's permanent. There's a difference." Rosa crossed her arms. "The wording says you interfered with an active clinical intervention. That's not a policy flag. That's a liability document. I know what it is. Do you?" Rosa's voice dropped a register, not a question. "Because you're standing here pulling mop heads like it's a Tuesday, and a man is dead, and your name is on paper that says you caused a problem instead of seeing one." Ella fitted the mop head onto the handle. The snap of the collar was loud in the narrow corridor. "What do you want me to say, Rosa?" "I want you to say something that sounds like you understand the size of this." "I understand the size of it." "Then why are you—" Rosa stopped. She pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose. Fine. But I'm telling you because you should know. Not because I think you'll do anything about it. You're very good at not doing things." Elle picked up the bucket. "I have a 7 o'clock floor assignment." "Ward 3, Rosa said. "Whitlock's ward." "I know." Rosa watched her go. She didn't say anything else, which was its own kind of answer. The corridor outside Bay 4 was dry and faintly bright, the floor wax still holding from her own pass 2 nights ago. Elle moved the cart around the edge of the group without slowing. Whitlock stood at the center of it, 4 residents in a loose arc, Pip on the far left, a clipboard in her hands. The patient in Bay 4 was a man in his 60s, propped at 30 degrees, an oxygen cannula under his nose. Whitlock had one hand on the bed rail and was talking without looking at his notes. "Ejection fraction of 38, he said. "Bibacillar crackles on auscultation, JVP elevated to the angle of the jaw. What are we managing first?" One of the residents, young, eager, slightly too loud, said, "Volume status." "Volume status is a category," Whitlock said, not unkindly. "Give me a number and a direction." "Diurese, furosemide 44. "Better?" Whitlock glanced at the monitor. And if his creatinine comes back at 2.4? Silence from the ARC. Pip said quietly, "Dose adjust and recheck in 6 hours. You don't hold the loop diuretic with that degree of congestion. You just watch the renal function more closely." Whitlock smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached the corners of his eyes. "Exactly right. You hold it. You drown him." He turned back to the patient. "Mr. Osei, these are my residents. They're going to be excellent doctors. Right now, they're just learning to be afraid of the right things." The patient, Mr. Osei, gave a tired laugh. "Long as you're not afraid." "Not of this," Whitlock said. "We've got you." Elle moved the cart past the bay entrance and kept moving. The squeak of the wheels was the only sound she made. The whiteboard at the ward's nursing station listed 6 names under Whitlock's column. All 6 had a green marker dot beside them. Ella read them in the 2 seconds it took to pass. Room 412 was a single. The patient inside was a woman, perhaps 50, sitting rigid against the pillow with both hands gripping the sheet. A second-year resident Elle didn't know by name stood near the window, arms folded, watching. Elle had come to restock the supply shelf inside the door. She had the cart positioned and the packages in her hands before she registered that Whitlock was already in the room, seated in the chair beside the bed. Actually seated, not standing over the patient, not performing. "I don't want the cardioversion," the woman said. Her voice had the tight, careful quality of someone who had been crying recently and was determined not to, again. "I've read about it. I've read what can happen." "Tell me what you read," Whitlock said. "Stroke, clot, the shock itself, those are real risks," he said. "I'm not going to tell you they're not." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. "But here's what's also real. Your heart has been in this rhythm for 11 days. After 48 hours, the clot risk from the cardioversion becomes significant, which is why we anticoagulated you first. We've done that. We've done it correctly. The window is now. And if I say no, then we manage the rate medically, and you go home with a higher long-term stroke risk and a heart that's working harder than it needs to." He paused. "I think you should let me do this. But it's your chest." The woman looked at the ceiling for a long moment. The resident by the window was very still. "Will you stay?" she asked. "In the room. Not just the nurses." "I'll be here the whole time," Whitlock said. "Start to finish." She nodded once, a small, exhausted movement. Whitlock stood and touched her hand briefly, the back of it, just a second, before turning to the resident. "Get anesthesia down here. Conscious sedation protocol." Ella finished restocking the shelf and pushed the cart back into the hallway. The smell of chlorhexidine followed her out. The service elevator landing smelled of cardboard and hydraulic fluid. Boone was there with a hand truck and a sealed biohazard bag, waiting for the freight lift. Elle set the sharps container in the collection bin. "How's the floor?" Boone asked. "Clean." The elevator indicator clicked through numbers. "You working Whitlock's section all week?" "Apparently." Boone glanced at her hands on the cart handle. Not a long look, a second, maybe less. "You hold things steady," he said. "Noticed that. Some people, a hard shift, you can see it in their grip." Elle kept her eyes on the indicator. "It's a mop." "Sure," Boone said. The freight lift arrived. He loaded the hand truck without pressing the point. The doors closed between them, and the landing was quiet again. Pip was already at the nursing station when Elle came back to finish the floor near the teaching alcove. Whitlock stood at the whiteboard with a dry erase marker, 2 other residents flanking him. "Atrial fibrillation with rapid ventricular response," he said, drawing a rhythm strip freehand, and it was accurate, the irregularity of it rendered with the ease of someone who had drawn it 10,000 times. "Rate control versus rhythm control." "When do you choose rate?" Pip answered, without hesitating. "Permanent AF, or AF greater than a year's duration where rhythm control has failed. Also elderly patients where the cardioversion risk outweighs the benefit, or where the AF is asymptomatic and rate controlled below 90 at rest." It was complete. It was correct. Elle could hear it. Whitlock recapped the marker. "Rate control is your choice when you've decided the AF is here to stay." He wrote it on the board in his own words, the same content, reorganized. The key question is always, is this rhythm reversible, or are we managing a chronic state? Once you've answered that, the algorithm writes itself. He moved on to the next question. Pip's pen was open in her hand. She wrote down what he'd written on the board, her own answer, translated back to her in his phrasing, attributed to the whiteboard. Nobody in the room said anything. The other residents were copying the same words. Elle finished the last section of floor near the alcove door, the mop moving in slow, even arcs across the linoleum. She did not look up. She reached the threshold, turned the cart, and pushed it through into the hallway. Behind her, Whitlock's markers squeaked against the board. The linen room was at the far end of Ward 3, past the utility closet and the broken sharps bin someone had taped a note to 3 weeks ago. Elle pushed her cart through the fire door at 2:40 a.m., the wheels catching on the threshold with their usual complaint. Inside, Denny, the overnight laundry runner, 19 years old, and perpetually aggrieved, was stacking folded sheets from a canvas hamper with the mechanical rhythm of someone who had stopped counting. "You're late," he said, not looking up. 14 bed was a spill. Elle set the cart against the wall and began checking the supply shelves. "I need a full restock. Pillow covers, bath blankets, the small draw sheets." "I've only got 6 draw sheets left." "6 is fine." "It's not fine, it's 6. He dropped a stack onto the shelf. "Requisition's been sitting in the system since Tuesday. Nobody picks it up." "Put it in again with a different priority code." Ella pulled a pillow cover from the stack and checked the seam. "Use urgent instead of routine." "It's the same system. The same system has different inboxes." She set the cover aside. "Try it." Denny considered this with the skepticism of someone who had tried things before. He picked up his phone, presumably to do exactly that, and the door opened behind him. Rosa stepped in. She clocked Denny, then Ella, then the shelves. She picked up a bath blanket from the wrong pile and set it back without comment. "Denny," her voice was level, "go check the linen cart on 7. It went up 2 hours ago and I haven't heard back." "I'm in the middle of—" "I know." Denny looked at Elle. Ella was reading the label on a box of draw sheets. He gathered his clipboard and left. The door closed. The ventilation hummed. Rosa turned to face the shelves and did not immediately speak, which was its own kind of statement. "The complaint," Rosa said, "uses the phrase interfered with an active clinical intervention. That's the wording. Not offered unsolicited opinion, not exceeded role, interfered. Clinical, intervention." She turned. "That's criminal framing. I know what it says." "Then you know it's not a write-up, it's a setup." "It's a document," Ella said. "Documents get filed." This one got countersigned by legal. "I know that too." Rosa pulled a stool from under the shelf and sat on it, which meant she was staying. "You said tracheal deviation. In the corridor. In front of 5 people. I've been a nurse for 30 years, and I've had one surgeon say that phrase in a corridor, and he was a thoracic fellow on his 2nd year." "I was guessing." "No." Rosa's voice was flat. "You weren't." Elle set down the box of draw sheets. The fluorescent tube above the shelf buzzed at a frequency just below the threshold of annoyance. "The wording in the complaint is what it is. I can't change it." "I'm not asking you to change it." Rosa crossed her arms. "I'm asking you to tell me who you are." "My name is on my badge." "Your name is on your badge," Rosa agreed. "And Boone told me your hands don't shake. He said it like it meant something. I've been thinking about what it means for 4 days." Elle was quiet. "Boone's been here 11 years, Rosa said. "He was a medic. He knows what trained hands look like." Rosa stood and said she was going to check the corridor was clear. She was gone for 90 seconds. Ella stood at the shelf with her hands at her sides. She turned her right hand over once, palm up, then back down. She did not look at it. When Rosa returned, she shut the door and leaned against it. "What were you?" she asked. Silence is a move. Ella had used it for 3 years, and it had worked. She looked at the middle distance between herself and Rosa, and understood that it was not going to work now. Rosa had been a nurse for 30 years. She had seen every variety of silence. "Surgeon," Ella said. "Trauma." Rosa absorbed this without expression. "Where?" "County General, before here." "How long?" 6 years as attending, 3 as resident before that. "And now you're—" Rosa gestured at the cart. "Now I'm this." Why? Not a question, an instruction to continue. Elle felt the shape of the answer she had prepared for this moment, the version with no edges, and delivered it without effect. My license is suspended. There was an incident. A patient died. The documentation said it was my error. She paused. It wasn't. Rosa waited. I signed a settlement, Ella said. It bars me from discussing the specifics publicly. In exchange, they didn't pursue criminal charges. She stopped there. What exactly does it bar? Rosa asked. What are the terms? It bars disclosure of the case details, the parties, the findings. Does it bar you from saying you were a surgeon? A beat. No. Does it bar you from saying what you saw in that corridor? Elle's jaw tightened, barely. That's a different question. Is it? The complaint frames my statement as clinical interference. If I try to defend it, I'm invoking medical knowledge I'm not licensed to use. That's the trap. She kept her voice even. The settlement and the complaint worked together. They were probably designed too. Rosa went quiet. Not the silence of someone thinking. Something else. Something older. She stared at the shelf of folded bath blankets, for a moment that lasted long enough for Elle to notice and not ask about. Then Rosa said, What do you want to happen? Nothing, Ella said. Nothing. I want to finish my shift. I want to go home. I want my mother's care home to stay paid. She held Rosa's eyes. That's the arithmetic. It's not complicated. A man is dead. Yes. His name was Thomas Reyes. He had a wife in the waiting room. Her name is Renata. Rosa's voice did not rise. She's been told it was an MI. She's been told it was fast, and that he didn't suffer. I know. Do you? I was there. Then you know the report is wrong. Rosa stood straight. You know what was in that corridor, and you know what the report says, and you are telling me you want nothing. I'm telling you what I can afford. Ella's voice was precise, not cold. I have a mother in a care home with dementia. The invoice is $4,000 a month. This job covers it. If I lose this job, she moves to a ward facility. She won't understand why. She paused once. That's not an excuse. That's a number. Rosa looked at her for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed register, quieter, and carrying something that had nothing to do with Thomas Reyes. I've worked this floor for 30 years, she said. I have watched things get filed. I know exactly what filed things look like. She picked up her pen from the shelf where she'd set it and clipped it to her pocket. I used to think that meant I understood the cost. She didn't finish the sentence. She moved to the door. Elle picked up the stack of folded draw sheets and set them on the cart, squaring the edges. The room was very quiet. Somewhere down the corridor, a monitor alarmed briefly, and then stopped. Rosa opened the door, then paused. She turned back, and this was a choice. The pause was too deliberate to be forgetfulness. You said the settlement bars disclosure of the case details, Rosa said. Yes. Not this case. No, not this case. Rosa nodded once, as if confirming something she had already calculated. I'm not asking you to do anything, she said. I just wanted to know what I was looking at. Ella held the sheets against her chest. Rosa left. The corridor outside was the same corridor it had always been. Linoleum, fluorescent, the faint smell of chlorhexidine, and the ghost of someone's instant coffee. Ella pushed her cart out of the linen room, and the door swung shut behind her. The ward stretched ahead in both directions, identical and indifferent. She started toward 14 bed. Rosa was pushing the medication cart back from Bay 4 when Ella rounded the corner with her linen trolley, and Rosa stopped walking the way she did when she had something to say and was deciding how to say it. Renata Reyes called the desk, Rosa said. She's coming in this morning for his things, a bag they've been holding at the nurse's station. When? 8, maybe 9, before the day shift gets loud. Rosa looked down the corridor, not at Elle. She's been calling around, asked 2 of my nurses what happened in the corridor, asked the ward clerk if there was a written account she could request. There is, Ella said. She can have it. She's already been told that. She's asking about the part that isn't in it. Rosa finally looked at her. She's not going away, Elle. I'm off shift at 7. You could be slow about it. Elle moved the trolley forward a few inches. The wheel needed oil. It had needed oil for 2 weeks. Or I could be on time. Rosa's jaw tightened just slightly. She's not a lawyer. She's not from the board. She's a woman who wants to know what her husband said before he went down. She paused. That's all she's asking. I know what she's asking. Then you know it's not in any report. Elle kept her hands on the trolley bar. The corridor smelled of floor wax and something antiseptic from Bay 2, sharp and faintly sweet. Rosa, I know what it costs. I know you do. Rosa picked up the medication cart handle. I'm just telling you she's coming. Ella took the service stairs. The elevator was slower, and she needed the 2 flights. Boone was on the landing between floors, thermos in hand, doing the thing he did at 4 in the morning when he needed a minute away from the desk cameras. He looked at her cart, then at her face. You heard, he said. Rosa told me. She came to the desk last night. He unscrewed the thermos cap, didn't pour anything. 40 minutes. Asked me if I remembered the man who collapsed on 3. He set the cap down on the railing. I told her I remembered. What else did she ask? She asked why the doctor's first statement, what he said out loud in the corridor, didn't match the admission notes. He looked at the cap. She'd read both. Somehow. She's not stupid. No. She said the doctor told the paramedics one thing and wrote something different. She wanted to know if that was normal. He finally poured the coffee, steam rising in the cold stairwell air. I told her documentation gets updated as the clinical picture clarifies. Which is true. Which is also not what she was asking. No. He drank. It's not. He looked at her steadily. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you she noticed something without anyone pointing her at it. That's a different kind of person than someone who's been coached. Elle picked up the trolley handle. I know. She's going to ask you the same question she asked me, because you were there and I wasn't. I know that too. He nodded once and stepped aside so she could pass. The plastic bag was already on the chair in the family alcove when Elle arrived, a clear hospital bag, knotted at the top, a wallet and a phone, and what looked like a folded jacket compressed into a shape too small for what it contained. Elle set her trolley against the wall and began wiping down the windowsill. Renata Reyes was 60, maybe 58, with the kind of tiredness that had moved in behind her eyes and was not going anywhere. She carried a canvas tote and wore a coat that was too warm for the season. She stopped when she saw Ella. I'm sorry, Renata said. I can come back. You're fine. Elle kept the cloth moving along the sill. Renata sat down next to the bag. She put her tote on the floor and her hands in her lap and looked at the bag for a moment without touching it. They said I could take it whenever I was ready. Take your time. A pause. The monitor 2 rooms away cycled through its routine tone, steady and indifferent. Renata said, You were there, in the corridor. Ella stopped wiping. Yes. I've been trying to understand what happened. Renata's voice was careful, the way a person's voice gets when they have rehearsed something and are trying not to sound like they rehearsed it. The notes say inferior myocardial infarction. That's what they told me at the family meeting. That's what the death certificate says. Yes. But the doctor, the surgeon, the one everyone knows, he said something different. In the corridor, to the paramedics. She looked up at Elle. I have a friend who works in emergency registration. She heard what he said when Thomas first came in. And then she read the admission notes the next morning, and they said something else. Ella held the cloth. The window glass was cold through it. I'm not accusing anyone, Renata said. I just want to understand. My husband was talking to me that morning. He made coffee. He was going to call our son. Her hands moved, then stilled again. There was a sentence he started on the phone with me, right before it happened. He said, Renata, I need you to know. And then he stopped. He said he had to go. That was the last thing. She pressed her lips together. I've been trying to finish it for him. I thought if I understood what actually happened, maybe I could. The alcove was very quiet. The doctor said one thing, Renata said. The notes say another. Can you tell me why? Ella looked at the bag on the chair. The folded jacket pressed against the plastic, one sleeve visible, dark blue. She looked at Renata's hands. I can't explain the notes, Ella said. Renata waited. What I can tell you is that your husband was not alone in that corridor. People were trying to help him. She stopped. That was the edge of what she could say, without crossing into the territory the settlement had not sealed, but her own arithmetic had. The discrepancy you found, the one between what was said and what was written. She paused again. You're right that it's there. Renata's breath caught, just slightly. I can't tell you more than that. Ella's voice was level, no clinical register, nothing that would sound like a doctor. I'm sorry. Renata picked up the bag. She held it in both hands, the knotted top against her chest. You're not just a cleaner, she said. Not accusing, observing. Elle did not confirm it. She did not deny it. She picked up her cloth and moved to the next section of window, and Renata sat there another minute before she stood, tucked the bag under her arm, and walked toward the elevator without looking back. Ella's cart was passing the medication room when Pip Sethi appeared on the other side of the glass door, and their eyes met before either of them moved. Pip opened the door. I saw her on the floor, she said low. The widow. Reyes. I know. Did she speak to you? She came for his belongings. Pip stepped halfway into the doorway, not quite blocking it, not quite clear of it. What did she ask? Why the corridor account and the notes don't match? The color in Pip's face changed. Not much. Enough. What did you tell her? That the discrepancy exists. Pip's hand found the door frame. You can't just... She stopped, restarted. People are going to hear she was asking questions. She was always going to ask questions. Her husband died. I know that. Pip's voice dropped further. I know that. She looked down the corridor, both directions, the fast automatic check of someone who had learned to know who was listening. What does she think happened? She thinks the account she was given is incomplete. Is she going to make a formal request to the board? Ella looked at her directly. Are you asking because you're worried about her, or because you're worried about what she might find? Pip's jaw tightened. She was 27 years old and frightened in a very specific way. Not of Elle, not exactly, but of what Elle represented. A witness, someone who had been in the corridor and was still standing in this building, asking nothing and missing nothing. I don't know what I'm worried about, Pip said finally. It sounded like the most honest thing she had said in days. Then you should probably figure that out, Elle said, and moved the cart forward. The ward was quieter by 6. A monitor 2 rooms from the linen room gave its steady tone, then went silent on a reset. Ella was folding sheets when Rosa came in and closed the door. She left, Rosa said. Renata, I saw her at the elevator. I know. Rosa leaned against the shelving. She didn't ask what was said. She was quiet for a moment in the way that meant she was building toward something. There was a patient, Rosa said, before you came here. Long before. She stopped. Elle folded the sheet in half, then in quarters. She did not look up. She did not ask. I was 34, Rosa said. Night shift. Different hospital. She stopped again. Longer this time. The linen room smelled of detergent and warm cotton. I saw something and I didn't... She pressed her lips together. I told myself the paperwork would catch it, that someone with more authority would... She didn't finish. Elle set the folded sheet on the stack. Her hands rested on it, flat and still. The radio on Boone's belt crackled at 11:47 p.m. Elle heard it from the end of the ambulance bay corridor. 2 words, scaffold collapse, then a number, then static. Boone was already moving toward the bay doors. Clear the corridor, he said, not looking at her. We've got 12 incoming, minimum. Ella wheeled her cart to the wall and stayed there. He turned. Mercer, I said clear it. How did the scaffold come down? A pause. His army medic brain ran the question before he answered. Wind shear plus a failed anchor point. 3 floors. Some fell straight, some got caught on the 2nd level and swung. So blunt thoracic on the straight falls, crush and shear on the ones who swung. That's the read, yeah. He studied her for a second. You need to go upstairs. I'll stay out of the way. He made a sound that wasn't agreement and not refusal, then turned back to the doors. Behind them, the first siren was already close. Rosa had commandeered 2 linen carts and a supply trolley to create a staging corridor inside the triage bay entrance. She was directing an orderly with the flat efficiency of someone who had done this before, not the scaffold part, but the "this is what we have, make it work" part. She registered Elle without breaking stride. "You're not supposed to be on this floor." "I know. Whitlock's running primaries, Pip's on secondaries." Rosa repositioned a cart 6 inches to the left. "If you're thinking of doing something, don't." "I'm not thinking anything. You've been standing in that exact spot for 4 minutes. The cart needs to be here for restocking." Rosa looked at the cart, then at Elle. "There's nothing on that cart that anyone needs tonight." Elle kept her hands on the handle. "Who's his second on primaries?" "Pharaoh, cardiothoracic fellow. Good hands, does what he's told." Rosa pulled a stack of trauma drapes from a shelf and dropped them on the nearest surface. "Which means Whitlock makes the calls, and Pharaoh executes them." "Okay. That's not me giving you permission." "I know." Rosa turned away first. The first 4 casualties came in fast. Lacerations, a broken radius, 1 head injury that Pip caught and routed to CT before Whitlock reached her. The 5th was a man in his 40s, construction vest still on, oxygen mask already fogged from shallow breathing. His systolic was 84 on the paramedic's handoff and dropping. Whitlock was at the head of the gurney before it stopped moving. "Chest trauma, right side. Decreased breath sounds." He pressed 2 fingers to the man's trachea. "Midline. Okay. Tension pneumo, needle decompression, second intercostal, mid-clavicular." Pharaoh reached for the kit. Ella was 3 feet away with the supply cart. She had heard the paramedic's numbers. She had watched the man's neck. "His JVP is elevated," she said. Whitlock did not look up. "Excuse me?" "Jugular venous pressure. It's elevated. Trachea's midline. BP's 84, and the rhythm on transport was narrow complex." She kept her voice level, the same register she used to read vitals to a scrub nurse. "That's not a tension pneumo." The room went quiet in the specific way rooms go quiet when something has broken the expected order. Whitlock straightened. He looked at her, really looked, the way he hadn't since the corridor with Thomas Reyes. "You're the cleaner." His neck veins are distended. Muffled heart sounds on the left. "I heard breath sounds on the right. Diminished, not absent. The triad fits tamponade, not pneumothorax." She held the cart handle. "Needle decompression won't help him." Pharaoh had gone still with the kit in his hands, his eyes moving between them. "Dr. Whitlock." Pip's voice came from 2 gurneys over, careful and quiet. The presentation does fit Beck's triad." Whitlock turned to Pip with an expression that was not anger. It was assessment. Then he turned back to the man on the gurney, whose monitor showed 79 systolic and a rate of 118. "Get me a cardiac echo," he said. To Pharaoh, not to Elle. The portable ultrasound was 15 seconds away. Pharaoh ran the probe over the man's chest. The image came up. Pericardial effusion, visible and significant, the heart moving in a dark ring of fluid. Whitlock stared at the screen for 2 seconds. "Pericardiocentesis, now." He did not look at Ellie again. "Someone get me an 18-gauge spinal needle and a 10 ml syringe." Ella stepped back from the cart. She did not watch the procedure. She watched the monitor. The systolic climbed, 84, 91, 103, as Whitlock drained the effusion with the same precise hands that had humiliated her in this building 7 weeks ago. The man's breathing slowed into something less desperate. Pip was watching the monitor too. When it crossed 100, she exhaled. Nobody said anything to Ella. Whitlock stripped his gloves and walked directly to the charge desk. Ella found the supply corridor by the back stairs and started restocking the cart from the shelves there, working by feel in the half-dark because she had not turned the overhead light on. Pip appeared in the doorway 2 minutes later. "Can I—" She stopped, started again. "I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." "How did you know it wasn't a pneumothorax?" Elle set a box of IV supplies on the cart. "The neck veins." "But you knew before you saw the echo. You were certain." "I wasn't certain. I was more likely right than he was. Pip stepped into the corridor. The chlorhexidine smell was stronger here, concentrated by the closed space. You've seen it before? Elle didn't answer that. Okay. Pip shifted her weight. Different question. The Reyes admission notes, the ones from the corridor. I pulled the original monitor strip from that night. The card handle was cold under Ella's hands. Why? Because the strip and the notes don't match. The rhythm on the strip shows... Pip stopped, lowered her voice, though there was no one else in the corridor. It shows what you said it showed, in the corridor, that night. That's a serious thing to be saying. I know what I'm saying. Pip's jaw was tight. I haven't done anything with it. I haven't told anyone, but I needed you to know that I have it. Ella put the last box on the cart. Why? Because you just did it again, in front of 30 people. Pip's voice was steady, but her hands were not, one of them pressed flat against the wall. And I needed to know if you're going to keep doing it alone. Elle picked up the cart handle. Go back to your secondaries, Dr. Sethi. Pip held her ground for a moment. Then she left. Rosa found Elle in the break room at 12:40 a.m., sitting at the table with a cup of water she hadn't touched. He went to the charge desk, Rosa said. She pulled out the chair across from Elle and sat down. Within 5 minutes of the echo result. I know. He used the word unlicensed. He asked for documentation of the incident. Carla at the desk wrote it up. Rosa folded her hands on the table. That's the second time he's filed on you. Yes. This time there are 30 people who saw the patient stabilize. Yes. Rosa was quiet for a moment. The break room's fluorescent tube buzzed faintly, one of the ballasts going, a sound Ella had been tracking for 3 weeks without reporting it. What happens now? Rosa asked. Ella turned the cup in her hands. He files. Vance gets the report. Vance has a problem, because the first filing says I interfered with clinical care, and the second filing says I did it again, and a man's blood pressure went from 79 to 103. So they contradict each other. Not to Vance. To Vance, they're the same document. Unlicensed interference? Twice. The outcome doesn't change the framing. Rosa looked at her. And you? I'm going to finish my shift, Ella said, and then I'm going to go home. Rosa stood. She picked up her radio from the table where she'd set it and clipped it back to her scrub top. She paused at the door, her hand on the frame. Ella's cup sat untouched on the table, the water perfectly still, catching the bad light from the failing tube above. The administrative room smelled of toner and old carpet. One fluorescent tube buzzed at a frequency just above hearing. Adrian Vance was already seated when Elle arrived, a manila folder open in front of him, a pen laid beside it at a precise angle. Ms. Mercer. He gestured to the chair across from him. Thank you for coming. Ella sat. The folder held 3 pages. She read the top line upside down, without appearing to. I'll be direct, Vance said. Last night's incident has generated a second documentation event. Combined with the existing complaint, the hospital's exposure is significant. This, he tapped the folder, is a resolution. What are the terms? 12 months continuation of your current compensation. A formal acknowledgement that your role in both incidents was motivated by concern for patient welfare. The complaint is withdrawn and sealed. He folded his hands. The care home arrangement remains unaffected. Ella's eyes moved to the pen. What happens to the care home funding if I don't sign? That's a separate matter entirely. I'm asking about it. Your employment status would be reviewed as part of the standard process. That review takes time. During that time, your payroll continues. He paused. But reviews have outcomes. How long do I have? End of business today. I need more time. Something shifted in Vance's posture, not satisfaction exactly, but the recognition of a familiar move. I can make it 5 o'clock. That's the same day. Yes. He closed the folder. It is. Elle stood. She left the pen where it was. The supply corridor ran behind the east stairwell, and Boone was crouched at the lock panel when Elle came through with her cart. He had a screwdriver in one hand and a key ring in the other, and he did not look up. Heard you had a meeting, he said. Word travels. I have sources. He tried a key, set it aside. What did he offer? Continuation pay, sealed complaint, care home stays funded. That's a good offer. I know. Boone tried another key. The lock clicked, and he swung the panel open, peered inside. You ask for time? Until 5. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Vance gives people until 5 when he wants them to sign by noon. The extra hours are for them to feel like they chose. I know that too. So what are you doing with them? He pulled a wire free, examined the connection. Arithmetic. Care home invoice due when? Friday. Boone was quiet for a moment. He reconnected the wire, closed the panel. He's done this before. The last time someone asked for time, they had a conversation with their supervisor before lunch. Supervisor found a performance issue that hadn't existed that morning. Who was the supervisor? Doesn't matter. They signed by 2. Elle gripped the cart handle. The rubber was worn smooth in the middle from years of other hands. You're telling me the window is shorter than he said. I'm telling you what I've seen. Boone stood, brushed his knees off. That's all I'm doing. She pushed the cart forward. Near the end of shift, the nurse's station was running on the last hour's fuel, cold coffee, paper shuffling, the particular silence of people who had stopped talking about anything real. Rosa was working through handover notes. Pip stood at the counter with the discharge summary, initialing in the wrong places until Rosa pointed at the correct line without looking up. The scaffold patients, Rosa said. All 3 made it through the night. I know, Pip initialed again. I checked at 4. The third one, the one with the tension pneumo. Rosa turned a page. Whitlock's documented it as a delayed presentation. That's one way to describe it. Is there another way? Pip set the pen down. The documentation is what it is. Rosa looked at her then. What did you see during the collapse response? I saw Dr. Whitlock manage a mass casualty event. And before he got there, Pip stopped. I was assisting. Assisting who? Ella was 3 meters away, running the mop in long, slow arcs across the floor. She kept her back to them. The situation was fluid, Pip said. Rosa went back to her notes. 20 years ago, I had a patient, surgical resident, new to the floor. He was post-op, day 2, started showing signs of anastomotic leak, low-grade temp, tachycardia, the belly was guarding. I documented it. I told the attending. She turned another page. The attending said wait and see. Pip was very still. I waited, Rosa said. I saw. The mop stopped moving. Ella stood with both hands on the handle, not turning around. The resident's name was Daniel O.C., Rosa said. He was 26. Pip picked up the pen again. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. What happened to him? That's a different conversation. Rosa closed the folder. What I'm saying is that I know what it looks like when someone sees something and decides the documentation is what it is. Silence. The fluorescent light above the station buzzed once and steadied. She called the tension pneumo before the kit was even open, Elle said, still facing the wall. Pip's breath caught. Rosa didn't move. Whoever you're asking about, Elle said. That's what she saw. The linen room was narrow enough that 2 people standing in it was already a decision. Rosa pulled the door shut behind her. Ella was stacking clean pillow slips, her hands moving without thought. Daniel Osei, Rosa said. He died on day 4. Septic shock. Elle kept stacking. I had 30 years in this building. I had a mortgage. I had a daughter starting university. Rosa leaned against the shelving unit opposite. I told myself the attending had more information than I did. I told myself I had documented everything correctly. Both of those things were true. And he died anyway. And the attending retired with a good pension and a plaque in the corridor. Rosa's voice was even, stripped of everything except the fact. I have thought about Daniel Osei every single shift for 20 years. Not every day, every shift. Because this is where it happened. Ella set the last pillow slip down. I'm not asking you to do anything, Rosa said. I want to be clear about that. I am not asking. I know. I'm just telling you what the other side of the arithmetic looks like, the side that doesn't show up on the invoice. Rosa. What? What happened to the attending's documentation? Rosa's jaw tightened. Consistent with the standard of care. That's what the review said. Elle's hands rested flat on the stack of linen. The cotton was cool and slightly stiff from industrial washing. Neither of them moved. 5 o'clock, Ella said finally. I heard. Then I have to think. Rosa straightened, reached for the door handle. I know you do. She paused with her hand on the latch. For what it's worth, I think you already know what you think. You're just checking the math again. The door swung open. Rosa walked out. Ella stood in the narrow room with the smell of bleach and folded cotton and the buzz of the light above her, and she did not follow. The car park stairwell smelled of exhaust and cold concrete. Ella was on the second landing, her bag over one shoulder, when the door below swung open and Pip's footsteps came up fast. Ms. Mercer? Ella stopped. Pip reached the landing, slightly out of breath. The door swung shut behind her, then drifted open an inch on its slow hydraulic, then shut again. I have a question, Pip said. Clinical. Ask it. During the scaffold response, the third patient, the one you... Pip stopped, restarted. The trachea was deviated, maybe 2 centimeters. I wasn't sure if I was reading it right. You were reading it right. 2 centimeters is enough to act on. In that presentation, with that OSAT and that BP trend, yes. Pip's hands were in her coat pockets. The needle decompression was second intercostal, mid-clavicular. Standard landmark. And the immediate response, the pressure equalization, that was textbook, Elle said. It was textbook. Pip looked at the stairwell wall. The door drifted open behind her, let in a thread of cold air, swung shut. I've seen that procedure 3 times in simulation. Never on a real patient. Now you have. Now I have. Pip was quiet for a moment. The person who did it, they knew what they were doing. Yes. More than knew. Pip's voice was careful, deliberate, choosing each word like she was aware of what she was choosing. That wasn't training. That was memory. Ella looked at her. The stairwell light was the color of old paper. Is there anything else? Elle said. Pip held her gaze. Not right now. She turned and went back down the stairs. The door swung open for her and shut behind her, with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. And Elle stood on the landing with the deadline ticking, and Pip's last 3 words still in the air. Not right now. The corridor outside the stairwell smelled of floor wax and something antiseptic underneath it, the same smell as every 6 a.m. Elle walked back toward the break room without the folder. She had not taken it with her into the stairwell. That had been a choice. Scene 1, break room. Rosa was already there, both hands around a paper cup, watching the door. Boone told me, she said, 5 o'clock. Ella went to the sink and ran cold water over her wrists. Boone talks. Boone worries, there's a difference. Rosa set the cup down. Have you decided? I'm working on the math. The math. Rosa's voice flattened. Elle, it's a document. You've seen the structure before. I haven't seen this specific document? Same paragraph, Rosa said. Same order. I read Osei's attending's copy 3 years after he signed it. Section 4, subsection B. Employment status and associated benefits protected for the duration of the agreement. Same word, protected. Ella turned off the tap. You kept a copy. I kept everything. Rosa pulled her chair closer to the table. That word, protected, it did not mean what Dr. Kamau thought it meant. He signed on a Tuesday. By Thursday, his department head had restructured the unit and his position was reclassified. Technically compliant, technically protected, practically gone. Vance isn't Kamau's department head. No, Vance is smarter. Rosa waited. So, have you decided? Elle dried her hands on a paper towel and folded it in half. Not yet. What's left to calculate? Ella dropped the towel in the bin. I'll let you know. Rosa's jaw tightened, but she picked up her cup and said nothing more. That, too, was a kind of answer. Scene 2, loading dock. Boone was checking the overnight delivery manifest when Elle found him, the clipboard balanced on one forearm, pen moving slowly down the page. Rosa said you had a 2 o'clock theory, Elle said. Not a theory. He initialed a line. Precedent. Housekeeping 2019. Woman named Carrasco. Vance gave her until 5, same as you. Her supervisor filed a performance note at 11:45, first one in 4 years. She signed at 2:10. The performance note was manufactured. Probably. Didn't matter by 2:10. He flipped the page. You got anything on your file from this week? Elle considered. Nothing filed. I checked the board. Check again before noon. He set the clipboard on the dock ledge and turned to face her. I want to show you something. He held out his right hand, palm up. The knuckles were scarred, the tendons visible when he flexed. 22 years, Army. I know what hands look like when they've done real work under pressure. Not gym work, not careful work. He lowered his hand. Vance has document hands. Clean, dry, very still. He held that folder the same way every time, 2 fingers on the spine, thumb along the edge, like it was a brief he'd already won. What does that tell me? It tells you he thinks the document is already signed. He's managing a timeline, not a negotiation. Boone picked the clipboard back up. A negotiation? Somebody moves. He's not moving. He's waiting for you to catch up to where he already is. Ella was quiet for a moment. The care home invoice is Friday. I know. $4,000 a month. The settlement covers 12 months up front. I know that too. He met her eyes. I also know you haven't signed yet. And it's 7:43. The 38 bus ran along the riverside. Ella sat by the window, her phone open to the invoice. Sycamore House Residential Care, outstanding balance 4 through 20 tours, due 14 March. The number had not changed since she last looked. It would not change by looking again. She put the phone in her pocket. Scene 3, June's rooms. The room smelled of talcum powder and something floral from the diffuser on the windowsill. June was sitting up in bed, hands folded, watching the door with the particular alertness that meant she had been watching it for some time. Carla, June said, you're late. Elle sat in the chair beside the bed. It's Ella, Mum. Carla always does this. She says 7, and she means 8. June patted the blanket. Sit closer. Ella moved the chair. How are you feeling? My feet are cold. June frowned at the window. Is it still raining? It stopped. Carla would know. She always checks. June's hand stilled. Are you staying for lunch? For a while. June nodded, satisfied, and then her attention drifted to the wall above the door. Elle waited. The diffuser clicked softly. Carla died, June said, to no one in particular. Yes. I keep forgetting. She turned back to Ella, and for a moment her eyes sharpened, the real June surfacing. You look tired. I'm all right. You always say that. June's hand moved to Ella's wrist and rested there, light as paper. Are you in trouble? Ella kept her face even. Nothing I can't sort out. That's what your father used to say. June's grip tightened slightly. He sorted everything out, right up until he couldn't. She paused. The thing about sorting is you have to know what you're actually sorting, not what you think you're sorting. Ella stayed still. He thought he was sorting the money, June continued, her voice drifting again. But it was never the money. It was something else entirely. She patted Ella's wrist twice and released it. Are you cold? My feet are cold. I'll get the nurse to bring an extra blanket. Carla never remembers the blanket either. June leaned back against the pillow. You look just like her, around the eyes. Ella sat with her until June's breathing evened and her hands relaxed against the blanket. The diffuser clicked. Outside the window, a bus went past. Not what you think you're sorting. Her shoes squeaked on the care home linoleum as she walked toward the office, the same pitch as St. Bride's, the same damp floor friction. She noticed it and kept walking. Scene 4, care home office. Paulette had a desk covered in color-coded folders and the focused efficiency of someone who managed 20 families' paperwork simultaneously and resented any of them being surprised by routine requirements. Ms. Mercer, good timing. She pulled a yellow folder. Friday invoice. You'll have seen the email. And I need the annual employer verification before end of the week. Ella sat down. The verification form. Standard requirement. We need confirmation of active employment from your current employer, HR signature, current role, active status. It's in your admission contract, Section 9. Paulette opened the folder. We usually send the form directly to HR, but yours bounced back last year, so we're routing it through you this time. The settlement agreement I'm looking at, it references care home placement as protected. Paulette's expression shifted to polite incomprehension. I'm not sure what agreement you mean. A document from my employer. It says care home costs are protected. Protected how? Payment-wise or placement-wise? Elle kept her voice level. What's the difference? Payment protection means someone guarantees the invoice gets paid. Placement protection would mean we can't discharge your mother for non-payment. Paulette folded her hands. We don't accept third-party payment guarantees as a substitute for the verification form. The form confirms active employment. If your employment status changes, we need to know, not because of the money, but because the local authority funding assessment changes. It affects her care plan classification. So even with a guaranteed payment, if my employment is terminated, her classification could change. Yes. Paulette pulled a second sheet from the folder. It's Section 9, subsection 3. Would you like a copy? Ella took the sheet. The clause number was 9.3b. The language was 14 words. Verification of active employment status required annually to maintain current care plan classification. 14 words that Vance's document did not address. She photographed clause 9.3b on the bus back. The time on her phone read 3:47 p.m. She read the settlement's Section 4, subsection B again, employment status and associated benefits protected for the duration of the agreement. Benefits, not classification, not care plan. Benefits. Rosa had been right about the word. Scene 5. Hospital Counsel's Anteroom. Vance was standing when she came in, jacket on, the folder already on the desk. He checked his watch, 4:52 p.m., and gestured to the chair. Ms. Mercer? Ella sat. She set her phone on the desk, screen up, the photo of clause 9.3b visible. I have a question about Section 4, subsection B, she said. Vance's expression stayed neutral. Go ahead. Employment status and benefits protected. Does that include care plan classification at Sycamore House? A brief pause. The language covers employment-linked benefits. The care home requires annual employer verification of active employment status. Section 9, subsection 3 of the admission contract. If my employment terminates, even with payment guaranteed, my mother's care plan classification changes. Elle kept her voice flat. Your document doesn't address that. Vance pulled the folder open and ran his finger down the page. He did not rush. He read it twice. The intent of the clause. I need the intent confirmed in writing. Specifically, that Sycamore House will receive annual employer verification consistent with active employment status for the duration of the agreement, regardless of my actual employment status. Vance closed the folder. He was quiet for 4 seconds. Ella counted. That's an addendum. Yes, I can have it drafted. Tonight. Another pause. I can have it to you by 9 tomorrow morning. Then I'll be here at 9. Vance picked up the folder. His hands were exactly as Boone had described, 2 fingers on the spine, thumb along the edge, completely still. Ms. Mercer, the offer doesn't improve with time. I'm not asking for an improvement. I'm asking for accuracy. Ella stood. 9 o'clock. She walked out before he could recalibrate. The night shift cart was already in the 3rd-floor supply room when she clocked back in. Elle filled the mop bucket, listened to the water hit the plastic, and wheeled it out into the corridor. The fluorescent light above Bay 4 flickered once and steadied. The floor stretched ahead of her, pale and unmarked, smelling of chlorhexidine and the faint ghost of floor wax from the morning. She pushed the mop forward. The clock on the wall above the nurse's station read 6:14 p.m. 9 o'clock was 15 hours away, and the addendum either said what she needed it to say, or it did not, and she would know which when she read it. She pushed the mop forward again. The addendum was 2 pages. Vance had printed it on hospital letterhead, which told Ella something about how confident he was she would sign. She read it under the corridor fluorescence outside the records room, the smell of floor wax rising from the linoleum she'd mopped 3 hours earlier. The language in Clause 1 was correct. Clause 2 was correct. She reached 9.3b and stopped. "You left out, regardless of actual employment status," she said. Vance kept his hands in his coat pockets. "The clause as drafted achieves the same functional outcome. It achieves the same outcome if my employment status never changes. If I'm terminated for cause before the agreement runs, the verification obligation lapses. That scenario it's the scenario your complaint creates." She turned the page over. "You drafted a document that protects the care home against a future you're not planning to create. You left out the language that protects it against the future you are?" Vance's jaw shifted. "Ms. Mercer, the board convenes at 9. If I go back to draft, then go back to draft. The window closes at 9. If you haven't signed by then, I take the current offer off the table and present the complaint as filed." "You said that yesterday." She held the pages out to him. "The language is wrong." He took the pages. His fingers were cold. She felt it in the brief transfer. He looked at her for a moment with the expression of a man recalculating, then turned and walked toward the lift. Boone was waiting in the stairwell, one floor up, arms folded, back against the wall. He'd been there long enough that the cold had come through his jacket. "He left empty-handed," Boone said. "He left with the draft." "Same thing." He pushed off the wall. "You know what he does now." "Goes back to his office and corrects the language. Goes back to his office, corrects the language, and calls the board chair before 8:30 to flag that the settlement is at risk of collapsing." Boone's voice was even, the way it got when he was reading a situation he'd already mapped. Board chair calls, legal. Legal tells Vance to file the complaint as is and let the process run. You lose the addendum and the settlement in the same move. That's possible. It's not possible. It's the procedural calendar. I've watched Vance work 3 of these. He paused. You have maybe 90 minutes before the board chair's phone rings. Ella leaned against the railing. The stairwell smelled of cold concrete and the faint chemical residue of the cleaning cart she'd left on the landing below. "Is there anything else I should know that I don't already?" Boone considered that. "Pip Sethi came in at 6. She's not on shift until 9. "No," he said, "she's not." Elle folded the addendum along its center crease, once, deliberately, not crumpling it, and slid it into her uniform pocket. She walked toward the linen room, at the pace of someone with somewhere to be. Rosa was already inside, pulling sheet sets from the lower shelf. She heard Elle come in and kept pulling. "He brought the wrong language," Elle said. "Of course he did." Rosa stacked the sheets on the cart without turning. "First draft is always the wrong language. It's a test to see if you know." "I knew. I know you knew." Rosa finally turned. Her face was tired in the specific way of the end of a long shift. Not exhausted, just used. "Sit down. I need to tell you something, and I need to say it once." Elle sat on the edge of the cart. "Daniel Ossie," Rosa said, "after he died. The attending, Dr. Farrow, he's retired now, doesn't matter. He came to me at the nursing station with a note, handwritten. Said Daniel's presentation on admission was agitated and non-compliant with assessment. Asked me to initial it so it could go into the chart. And you initialed it." "I initialed it." Rosa set down the sheets. "It wasn't a lie I wrote. It was a lie I confirmed. I told myself that was different." She stopped, corrected herself. "No, I told myself it was survival. That's what I actually told myself. What happened to the family? They filed a complaint. Farrow's note was in the chart. Complaint was reviewed and dismissed." Rosa's voice stayed flat. "Daniel's wife, Margaret, she came back twice. Second time, the patient liaison told her the file was closed." Elle said nothing. "I'm not telling you this for absolution," Rosa said. "I'm telling you because you're about to sign a document, and I want you to know what a document does to the person who signs it. It doesn't go away. It just accumulates." She picked the sheets back up. "That's all. Go." Ella stood. She stayed 1 beat longer than necessary, the hum of the fluorescent above them the only sound, and then she pushed the cart into the corridor. The cardiac records room was at the end of the east wing, a converted storage space with 2 filing cabinets and a table. Pip was standing at the table when Elle pushed open the door. She had a printout in front of her, both hands flat on the paper, not pressing it down so much as steadying herself. I went to the archive at 6:15, Pip said. The strip from Reyes's admission. It's not in the digital system. It was never scanned. How did you find it? Physical file, admission folder, behind the lab requisitions. Her hands stayed on the paper. I've been thinking about going to get it since the scaffold night. I kept not going. She exhaled. And then I went. Elle stood across the table. She kept her hands at her sides. Tell me what you see on it, she said. Pip looked down at the strip. The paper was thermal, slightly waxy, the ink a dense black, with the timestamp printed at the top edge. 23:04:17. Sinus rhythm converting to narrow complex tachycardia at 23:04. Rate climbs to 142 over 90 seconds. She moved her finger along the trace without lifting it. Then, here, electrical alternans. Beat-to-beat variation in QRS amplitude. What does that pattern suggest? Pericardial effusion with tamponade physiology. Pip's voice was precise and frightened. Not an inferior MI. Not primarily. What does Whitlock's documented account say the rhythm showed on admission? Sinus tachycardia, with ST changes consistent with inferior wall ischemia. Those are different findings. Yes, Pip looked up. That's why I went to the archive. Ella held her gaze. Does anyone else know you have that? No. Is it the only copy? The digital record has no strip. This is the physical original. Pip's hands pressed slightly harder against the paper. What do I do with it? You keep it, Elle said. Not me. You. I don't... Pip stopped. Started again. If I keep it, I'm the one who has to decide what to do with it. Yes. You're not going to take it. I can't be the chain of custody on that document. Elle's voice didn't change register. My license is suspended. If I touch it, the strip becomes inadmissible, and you become a witness to my handling evidence I have no standing to handle. It stays with you. Pip stared at the paper. The timestamp read 23:04:17 in sharp black ink, the trace running beneath it like a sentence that couldn't be unread. Okay, she said very quietly. Ella was in the east corridor at 8:47 when her phone rang. Vance. I've revised the language, he said. Section 9.3b now reads, regardless of actual employment status. It's what you asked for. Has the addendum been filed with the board yet? A pause, 3 seconds, maybe 4. It will be filed simultaneously with the signed settlement. So it hasn't been filed. Ms. Mercer, if the board already had the addendum, you'd have said yes. She kept walking. You need my signature before you file it, because without my signature, it's just a document you drafted that no one has agreed to. The offer expires at 9 o'clock. I understand the deadline. Do you have an answer? The corridor stretched ahead of her, empty. Somewhere behind a closed door, a monitor alarmed once and went quiet. Not yet, Elle said, and ended the call. Vance had the corrected addendum. Pip had the monitor strip. Neither of them knew what the other held. Elle put her phone back in her pocket and kept walking, the addendum still folded against her hip, unsigned. The linen room smelled of warm cotton and the faint chemical bite of the fabric softener the hospital ordered in 40-liter drums. Rosa was already inside when Elle pushed the door open at 7:10, sitting on an upturned laundry crate with her arms crossed and her lanyard tucked into her breast pocket so the badge faced inward. Close it, Rosa said. Ella closed it. I've been thinking about Daniel Osei since I told you. Rosa's voice was level, the way it got when she was choosing each word before it left her mouth. I've been thinking about him for 20 years, but I didn't say his name out loud to another person until last week. You know what that does to a thing? Keeping it that quiet? It calcifies, Ella said. It calcifies. Rosa unfolded her arms. I'm going to the board. I'll tell them what I saw the night Reyes came in, what the monitor showed before Whitlock changed his documentation, what I heard you say in that corridor. And I'll tell them about Osei. The whole thing. What I saw, what I didn't report, what it cost him. Ella kept her back against the door. That's your pension. 31 years, yes. Rosa, I'm not asking your permission. Rosa stood up, and the crate scraped against the floor. I'm telling you so you know the number, so when you're doing your arithmetic, you put it in the right column. Daniel Osei was 34 years old. He had a daughter in primary school. I have been drawing a salary in this building for 31 years, and he has been dead for 20. That's the arithmetic I've been doing. Ella held the door handle behind her back. She had nothing to say to that. Rosa picked up her lanyard, flipped the badge outward, and walked past her into the corridor. The supply room on the east corridor was locked, but Pip was waiting beside it, her white coat folded over one arm, her stethoscope coiled in her pocket. She had the look of someone who had been standing there long enough to rehearse. "I pulled it from the archive 3 weeks ago," Pip said, without preamble. "The original monitor strip from the night Reyes arrested. It was filed under a different patient number, 1 digit off. Could be a transcription error." "Where is it now?" "My locker. Sealed envelope. My signature across the flap." Pip shifted her weight. "I've read it. I know what it shows." Ella kept her voice even. "Do you understand what you're holding, technically? From a liability standpoint? I'm a second-year resident who found a misfiled document and preserved it." Pip met her eyes. "That's all I did." "And at the review board?" Pip's jaw tightened. "I'll bring it. I'll put it on the table, and I'll say where I found it and when." She paused. "Whitlock is my supervisor. He writes my annual assessment. If I do this, I'm not getting a fellowship recommendation from him. I might not get a fellowship at all, depending on how the board reads my involvement. You understand that?" "I understood it 3 weeks ago when I pulled the file." She said it flatly, not asking for acknowledgement. "I need to know one thing. The waveform, the specific interval, is that enough to contradict his documented timeline?" Elle considered the question, not the answer. She was not going to give the answer, not here, not yet. But the fact that Pip was asking it correctly, using the right clinical frame, meant she knew what she was holding. "You're asking the right question," Ella said. Pip exhaled through her nose. "Okay." Boone was on the stairwell landing between the second and third floors, leaning on the rail with his arms crossed, his security badge clipped at his belt. He had a paper cup of coffee he wasn't drinking. "Renata Reyes called the patient liaison office yesterday morning," he said when Elle came through the door. "I know because Marlene in liaison called me to ask if I knew a Mrs. Reyes and whether her concerns were, quote, credible." "What did you tell Marlene?" "I told her they were credible." He set the coffee on the step. "Renata's coming in at 8. Her choice. I told her the building. She decided the time." Elle leaned against the opposite wall. "You've been talking to her?" "She called me. After the second visit." He glanced at his hands, then back up. "I've been in this building 11 years. Before that, Army medic, 8 years. You learn to read hands. Surgeons' hands, nurses' hands. The way someone holds a needle tells you more than their CV." He paused. "Your hands. First time I saw you mopping that corridor, you were holding the handle like a retractor. I clocked it inside 30 seconds. That's why you warned me about the personnel file. That's why I've been watching Whitlock's documentation since the Reyes night." He picked the coffee back up, still not drinking it. "I'll give a statement to the board. 11 years of employment. I'll say what I saw in that corridor, what I heard you say, and I'll say I flagged the incident report language to Rosa within 48 hours because the framing was wrong." He looked at her steadily. "They can have my job for it. I've got a pension from the Army that covers the gap." Ella absorbed that. The stairwell was cold, and the fire door at the bottom had a slow hydraulic hiss that never fully stopped. "Whitlock's registrar was in the east corridor during the scaffold collapse," Boone said. "Farhan. He was there for the whole thing. He saw what you did." Ella said nothing. "Just so you know the map," Boone said. 8:43. Ella checked the clock above the family waiting room door before she pushed it open. 16 minutes on the addendum. Renata Reyes was in the chair nearest the window, wearing a dark coat she hadn't taken off. She had a paper hospital cup of tea going cold on the table beside her. "I told the liaison office the account in the report is incomplete," Renata said, before Elle could speak. "I told them the woman in the corridor, the one they described as an unauthorized individual, was the only person who touched Thomas before the crash team arrived. I told them I wanted that on record." Ella sat down across from her. "That statement will be used in the board proceedings. They'll ask you to repeat it formally. In a room On record. I know. It will be. It takes longer than people expect. The process. Renata wrapped both hands around the cold cup. He was going to tell me something. In the ambulance, before they sedated him. He started a sentence, and they put the mask on. She stopped. I don't know what he was going to say. I've been trying to finish it for 4 months. I can't. She set the cup down. But I can say what I saw in that corridor. I can say a woman in a green uniform put her hands on my husband and knew exactly what she was doing. I can say the report doesn't match what I saw. Her voice held. That's the sentence I can finish. Ella's hands were flat on her thighs. The board will push back. They'll ask why you waited. I waited because a man from the legal office told me the hospital was conducting a full internal review and asked me not to speak to outside parties. Renata looked at her directly. I've been quiet for 4 months. I'm done being quiet. Ella held her gaze for a moment, then stood. 2 sentences of corridor, and Elle was back at the linen room. Rosa, Pip, and Boone were already inside. Nobody had arranged this. They had simply arrived. Rosa spoke first. What do you need from us before 9 o'clock? Ella stood in the doorway. The addendum was still folded in her left breast pocket, unsigned, the paper soft from being handled. She could feel the edge of it through the fabric. The strip, she said. Her register was different, clipped, precise, the voice she had not used in 3 years in front of more than one person. Keep it sealed until the board requests disclosure. Don't summarize it. Don't photograph it. Don't describe the waveform to anyone. The chain of custody is the only thing that makes it admissible. Pip nodded once. Rosa. Ella looked at her. When you give your statement, lead with Reyes. Ose is context, not the opening. The board needs to see the current case first, or they'll frame you as a grievance witness. Rosa's mouth pressed flat. I know how to give a statement. I know you do. Boone was watching Elle's hands. She realized it and stopped moving them. The clock on the wall read 8:58. The addendum sat unsigned in her pocket. She had not moved toward the door. Outside, somewhere on the floor above, a monitor alarmed once and then went quiet, and nobody in the room spoke, and Elle stayed exactly where she was. Rosa was already there, standing against the wall opposite the boardroom door, with her lanyard looped twice around her fingers. She straightened it when she heard Elle's footsteps on the linoleum. They called Boone first, Rosa said. He went in at 8:40. Chair's name is Dr. Okafor. She runs tight, no speeches. She'll cut you off mid-sentence if you start editorializing. Ella held her environmental services badge in her palm. She was technically still on shift. The board's scheduling office had not thought to ask. Order after Boone? You, then me, then Pip. Rosa adjusted the lanyard again. Whitlock goes last. His counsel requested it. Of course he did. Okafor won't let Vance speak unless she invites him. He knows that. He'll try anyway. Rosa glanced at the closed door. He tried it with me in the pre-session, and she shut him down in about 4 words. Ella turned the badge over. The laminate had a crack running through the corner from where she'd dropped it on tiles 6 months ago. What did he say to you, after? Nothing yet. He was on his phone. Rosa's mouth pressed flat. He'll have something to say after Whitlock's session. That's when he'll have something to say. The anteroom held 2 chairs and a water cooler that clicked every 40 seconds. Boone was already out of the boardroom when Elle arrived, standing near the window with his jacket folded over his arm. Quick? Ella asked. 12 minutes. He set the jacket on the chair. She asked me to read from the security log directly, the entry I filed the night of the Reyes incident. And? I read it. He looked at the window. Then she asked if the log reflected everything I observed that night. Ella waited. I said no. He said it the way he said most things, flat, factual, as though correcting a figure in a column. I said I observed the subject demonstrate clinical assessment behavior inconsistent with environmental services staff, steady hands on the patient's neck, respiratory rate count. I said I left it out of the log because I didn't know what category to put it in. What did Okafor say? She said, Thank you, Mr. Boone. That's been entered. Then Vance started to say something, and she said, "Mr. Vance, you'll have an opportunity." And that was the end of it. He picked up his jacket. "You're next." Elle moved toward the boardroom door. "Mercer." She stopped. Boone wasn't looking at her. The log needed a correction. That's all it was. She went in. The boardroom was smaller than she'd expected. 3 panel members at a long table, Vance in a chair against the side wall, a single seat facing the panel with a microphone that nobody had turned on. Dr. Okafor was in the center. Late 50s, reading glasses on a cord, a yellow legal pad in front of her with handwriting Elle couldn't read from the door. "Ms. Mercer, please sit." Ella sat. The chair had a slight wobble on the left rear leg. "You were present in the corridor on the night of November 14th when Mr. Thomas Reyes collapsed. Is that correct?" "Yes." "You made a verbal observation about his condition. Can you describe what you said and why you said it?" "I said the presentation was inconsistent with inferior MI. Distended neck veins, absent breath sounds on the left, tracheal shift. I said it looked like tension pneumothorax." Okafor wrote something. "Based on what training or experience?" "I held a medical license for 6 years. Trauma surgery. The license was suspended 3 years ago." Vance uncrossed his legs. "Chair, the settlement agreement governing Ms. Mercer's prior, Mr. Vance." Okafor's voice carried no particular edge, just wait. "I'll come to you." She turned back to Elle. "Dr. Whitlock's documented account states that your intervention was disruptive and that the clinical picture was consistent with MI throughout. Do you agree with that characterization?" "No." "Can you be more specific?" "The tracheal shift was visible. It was documented by the paramedic on the secondary assessment, 18 minutes after Mr. Reyes reached resuscitation. That's in the paramedic's report." "It is." Okafor made another note. "Would you characterize Dr. Whitlock's overall clinical competence as—" "I can only speak to what I observed in the corridor on November 14th. A pause. One of the other panel members, a man with a pen he kept clicking, stopped clicking. "That's your answer?" "Yes." Okafor studied her for a moment. "Thank you, Ms. Mercer. That's all." Pip had been in the anteroom for 11 minutes before they called her. Ella passed her in the doorway, Pip going in, Ella coming out, and neither of them spoke. Pip's hands were at her sides. She was carrying a manila folder. Inside, she placed the folder on the table in front of Okafor before she sat down. "This is the original rhythm strip from the corridor monitor on November 14th, Pip said. "It was filed under an incorrect patient identifier in the archive. I found it when I requested the record." Okafor opened the folder. She examined the strip for several seconds. "Dr. Sethi, can you characterize what this strip shows?" "The strip shows a transition from sinus tachycardia to pulseless electrical activity over a 4-minute window. The timestamp on the strip is 23:14. Dr. Whitlock's documentation states the patient was in normal sinus rhythm at 23:14, with rate-related changes consistent with an acute inferior MI. Those are inconsistent." "Yes." Vance leaned forward. "Chair, the strip's chain of custody has been logged," Okafor said. "Go on, Dr. Sethi." P in that context, with the physical signs Ms. Mercer described, is consistent with tension pneumothorax. It is not consistent with inferior MI as a primary diagnosis. The room was quiet enough that the ventilation hum was audible. "Dr. Sethi." Okafor removed her glasses. "You were present in the corridor that night. Why are you bringing this forward now?" Pip's hands were flat on the table. "Because I saw what Ms. Mercer saw. I didn't say so at the time." "Why not?" "A beat. I was afraid." Okafor put her glasses back on. "The strip is entered into evidence. Thank you, Dr. Sethi." Whitlock came out of the boardroom at 11:30. Vance was waiting in the corridor, and they walked 6 paces from the door before Whitlock stopped. "What does the strip actually prove?" he said. "PEA has multiple etiologies. I made a real-time clinical judgment in a corridor with no imaging, no labs. The strip proves your documentation is inconsistent with the physical record," Vance said. "That's what it proves. The timestamp could reflect a recording lag. The archive system on that floor has known—" "Grant." Vance's voice was measured. "I raised chain of custody." Okafor shut it down. The strip is in the record. Whitlock straightened his cuffs. My clinical judgment was sound, given the information available. Any experienced cardiologist reviewing the corridor presentation would need to explain why a paramedic's secondary assessment documented tracheal shift 18 minutes post-arrival. Vance looked at him steadily. That's the problem. Not the strip alone. The strip and the paramedic report, and Sethi's testimony, and Mercer's testimony. Together. Sethi. Whitlock said the name once, quietly, as though testing its weight. She's no longer your witness. A long pause. Whitlock adjusted his cuffs again. The same motion, the same hand, the same careful fold. The panel will understand context. They're clinicians. Vance said nothing. They know what it's like to make decisions at speed. Vance picked up his briefcase. I'll call you when Okafor sets the timeline for findings. He walked toward the lift. Whitlock stayed where he was, one hand still at his cuff. The stairwell smelled of floor wax and old concrete. Rosa was sitting on the third-step landing when Elle pushed through the door, shoes off, rubbing the arch of one foot. Okafor said something to you, Ella said. After. Rosa looked up. Off record? What did she say? She said, your testimony about the Osei case. That's not in our scope today, but I want you to know it's been heard. Rosa put her shoe back on. Just that. Then she thanked me, and I left. Your pension review starts Monday. Rosa said it without flinching. HR confirmed this morning. Ella's hands were on the stairwell rail, the metal cold through her palms. Does it change anything? Ella asked. Rosa stood, steadying herself against the wall. I've been paying Daniel Osei's family in silence for 22 years. That's a long invoice. She picked up her bag. This is just a different currency. Her footsteps went down, one flight, then the landing turn, then the second flight, until the fire door at the bottom opened and closed, and the stairwell was quiet again. Above, somewhere on the fourth floor, a monitor alarmed twice and then stopped. The board had not ruled. The panel had adjourned without a timeline. Ella held the rail and listened to the building breathe, and somewhere in Vance's briefcase was a question he hadn't answered yet. Vance was already in the corridor outside the board anteroom when Elle came down from the stairwell. He had his jacket on and a manila envelope in his hand, and he held it out before she reached him. Preliminary findings, he said. Issued this morning at 6:42. Elle took the envelope. She did not open it. Tell me what it says. Dr. Whitlock's clinical privileges are suspended pending a formal competency review. He said it the way he said everything, measured, flat, each word pulling equal weight. The suspension is immediate and indefinite. Indefinitely pending review means what, exactly? Months. Could be longer. And the incident report with my name on it. Vance adjusted his cufflink. The board's findings reference a discrepancy between the documented account and the physical evidence. The incident report is under administrative review. That's not an answer. The report is not being actioned against you at this time. Elle held the envelope at her side. My license. The board has formally flagged your suspension to the medical board for reinstatement review. He said it carefully, like a man placing something fragile on a shelf. That is a process, Ms. Mercer. It is not an outcome. I understand what a process is. The medical board sets its own timeline. 12 months is optimistic. 18 is realistic. And the settlement. The gag clause is being legally challenged. That takes time as well. He paused. The offer is void. There is nothing on the table. Ella turned the envelope over once. The paper was warm from his hand. Is that everything? For now. He held her gaze for a moment, not unkindly, just evenly. For what it's worth, the board heard the testimony, all of it. She walked past him toward the service corridor. The linen room smelled of bleach and warm cotton. Rosa was already there, folding pillowcases with the mechanical speed of someone who needed her hands occupied. She looked up when Elle came in and set down the stack. Okafor called me this morning, Rosa said. Before 6. What did he say? The pension review starts Monday as scheduled. That part hasn't changed. She picked up another pillowcase. But he said the scope is limited to the Osei payments, not the full pension. Past payments are protected. They can't claw back what's already been dispersed. That's survivable. I have to file a formal disclosure statement. Everything. The dates, the amounts, why. Rosa set the pillowcase down flat and pressed the crease with her palm. I've been thinking about what to call it. 22 years of paying a debt I couldn't pay any other way. You'll call it what it is, Elle said. A disclosure statement. Rosa's mouth tightened. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. The ventilation hummed above them. Okafor also said, off the record, not in writing, that the board's findings reference a pattern. Not just the Reyes case. A pattern. Whitlock's privileges are suspended. Rosa's hands went still. Indefinitely? Pending competency review. Rosa exhaled through her nose. It was not relief exactly. It was something more complicated. The sound a person makes when a thing they have waited a long time for arrives smaller than they imagined and still matters. The disclosure statement, Ella said. You'll need someone to sit with you when you write it. I have 30 years of night shifts. I can write a statement. I know you can. Rosa picked up the pillowcases again. Go find Pip. She's been in the break room since 5. The break room was empty, except for Pip, who was sitting at the far end of the table with both hands wrapped around a paper cup that had gone cold. She looked up when Elle came in. He talked to me, Pip said, after the board adjourned, in the corridor outside. Elle pulled out a chair across from her and sat. What did he say? He said he hoped I'd find a mentor who deserved me. Pip turned the cup slowly between her palms. He said it quietly, like he was being generous. Was anyone else there? No, just us. She set the cup down. It felt like a verdict, like he'd already decided what I was worth, and he was being gracious about it. What do you think you're worth? Pip looked up. I don't know yet. That's the problem. She pressed her thumbnail into the rim of the cup. My program director hasn't called. Whitlock was the reason I got this placement. Without him, I don't know what the program looks like. Have you asked? Not yet. Ask today. Ella kept her voice level. Don't wait for someone to tell you. Ask. Pip was quiet. Then, do you think he meant it as a threat? I think he meant it as a goodbye, Ella said. And I think you're right that it was also a verdict. His verdict, not the board's. Pip's jaw shifted. Those are different things. Yes. The fluorescent light above them buzzed once and steadied. Pip pushed the cold cup aside. Thank you, she said, for not telling me it's going to be fine. Boone was at the security desk near the car park entrance, writing something in a logbook with a pen he kept clicking. He stopped clicking when Ella approached. She's gone, he said. Whitlock left the building at 7:12. Voluntarily. Walked out with his bag. Didn't sign the log. He set the pen down. I logged it anyway. Time, direction, no escort. Anyone with him? No. Ella leaned against the counter. The car park smell came through the door, exhaust and cold concrete. What did you see? She said. When he left? Boone considered this. He stopped at the door, stood there maybe 10 seconds. He tapped the logbook once. Then he went through. That's not in any report. No. He picked up the pen again. Some things you just know you saw. Elle straightened. The log entry you corrected. For the board. Stands. Good. Boone clicked the pen once more. You going home? Night shift starts at 11. He looked at her for a moment, the same way he had looked at her hands in the corridor weeks ago, measuring something he didn't name. All right, he said. She came back at 11. The ward was quiet, the overhead lights dimmed to their night setting, the floor still damp from the early mop run. Elle pushed her cart past the nurse's station and down toward the east corridor, and at the bend, she saw Pip standing at the cardiac monitor outside room 4, staring at the waveform on the screen. Ella stopped the cart. What do you see? She said. Pip turned. The patient's stable. What do you see on the monitor? Pip looked back at the screen. Sinus rhythm. Rate 68. The ST segments look flat. Look at the T waves in V4 and V5. Pip leaned forward. The monitor cast a pale light across her face. They're slightly inverted. Slightly. More than slightly? Biphasic, Elle said. The deflection goes positive, then negative. See the notch? Pip pointed. There. That's Whelan's pattern. Type B. Pip's fingers stayed on the glass. That's a LAD lesion warning. It can be, not always, but you don't ignore it. Who's the patient? 61-year-old post-cath, day 2. His troponins were negative this morning. Pip turned to face her fully. Negative troponins and Whelan's. Troponins can be negative in the early window. Whelan's is a reperfusion pattern. It can show up after the ischemic episode has already passed. Ella kept her voice even, the same register she used for everything. You order a cardiology consult. You document what you saw. You don't wait for the troponin to move. Has anyone... I'm telling you what I see. You're the doctor on this floor. Pip looked back at the monitor. The waveform scrolled steadily, the soft electronic tick of it, the pale green trace repeating its small biphasic signature across the screen. I'm going to call cardiology, Pip said. Good. Pip pulled out her phone and walked toward the nursing station, already dialing. Elle watched her go, then turned back to her cart. The floor was dry where she was standing and wet where she hadn't been yet. She pushed the cart forward, and the wheels left a clean track on the linoleum. Behind her, Pip's voice carried down the corridor, low and precise. This is Dr. Sethi on 4. I need a consult on room 412. Whelan's pattern, type B. I want someone to look at this tonight. Ella did not stop moving. The mop head caught the light as she worked, and the corridor smelled of chlorhexidine and floor wax, and somewhere above them a monitor alarmed briefly and then settled back into its ordinary rhythm.